Welcome to the Accidental Experts podcast. I'm your host, Bryce Hamilton. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a child and family therapist. I have been in practice for over 15 years, and I'm also a mom of 4. So I know the challenges both professionally and personally. I'm so glad that you're here today to grow your parenting toolbox. Please come as you are and be ready to learn. My goal is to make you the accidental expert so that you can raise healthy humans. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm so glad you're with us today. I have a special fun guest for us today. His name is Antwauan Thompson, also known as Coach T, and he's going to be talking to us about how to raise strong leaders. With that, let's get to Coach T.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm so glad to have you here, Coach T, so that we can talk about raising strong leaders.
Absolutely. I'm 100% behind that because we definitely need more leaders because you and I are not going to always be around. So we got to
Yeah.
pass it on to somebody.
Yes. Yeah. We got to raise the future generation. So tell us a little bit about yourself as we're starting this. How did you get into this position in life of helping to raise strong leaders?
Well, you know, it all really, Bryce, starts with my father because my father was not my biological father. He served in the United States Marine Corps for 30 years and met my mom when my older brother and I were like 3 and 4, married my mom. And the first thing he did was adopt us, closed one chapter in our lives and opened another that I'm still living today.
Mm-hmm.
And he taught us about being men, my brothers and I, about leadership, about service, and about giving back when you're given the opportunity and not having any expectation of reward when you do that. You do it out of the goodness of your heart.
Yeah.
And that led me to start a nonprofit, which I named in my father's honor. We lost him in 1996 to leukemia.
Mm.
And I wanted to honor him, and I have a nonprofit, JLT Fieldhouse, which is named after him, Joe Louis Thompson Fieldhouse. And it's a coaching and mentoring organization that utilizes the game of basketball as our catalyst or our platform to teach leadership and coaching and mentoring young people and teaching them that what happens in sports happens in real life. You have to learn how to communicate. You have to learn how to have leadership skills. You have to learn how to work through challenges and things of that nature. And when the pandemic hit in 2020, it allowed me an opportunity to reflect on how I can expand on that because it basically shut down our nonprofit for about 11 and a half months. And it allowed me opportunity to focus just on the mentoring, coaching and mentoring without the athletic component.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what birthed the Coach T's Corner concept and led me to write my book, The Ultimate Guide to Sea of Success, The Ultimate Guide to Success for Preteens and Teens. And and all of this, I say, my wife and I weren't able to have kids of our own. And for a long time, was obviously down about that. But I realized that later on, I prayed a lot about it. And I realized that we weren't giving kids of our own because I was given a gift from from the powers above to impact more young people. And that's what I utilize my skills for now.
That's amazing. I love that story of how you had somebody come into your life that made such a great impact and you really took advantage of that and lived up to something that I'm sure that he would be so proud of you for today.
I hope so. I
Yeah.
sure hope so.
Yeah.
He was a
Yeah.
true inspiration, the epitome of leadership, too.
Yeah. So with that, talk to me about what is good leadership or strong leadership? What does that really mean?
To me, leadership is not about power and control. It's about service.
Mhm.
Because in order to have to be a leader, that means you have to empower and support people to be the best versions of themselves that they can be. Because if one leader just tells people and everybody does what they ask, nobody's growing into the next leadership role.
Mhm.
And all of my coaching, I've been coaching for going on, oh my gosh, I can't believe this, 39 years. And in 39 years, I've always coached the same way, and that's empowering kids to take ownership of their own success. And that's what leadership is about, putting people in position to take control, making decisions, right, wrong, or indifferent, but make those decisions because you learn from them.
Yeah, I love that. So do you think that leadership matters in life? Like is this something that should matter to kids, to parents and teens?
Absolutely. And, when you talk about family, I think that's where it starts because you think about leadership. Everybody thinks about leadership and they think about the workplace, right? They're
Mhm.
like, well, you got a boss, you got a supervisor, you got a manager. Well, guess what? Parents supervise, manage, and lead their homes. So that's where it starts for kids. So that's where their first leadership experience starts.
Hmm.
And when they're really young, yes, they rely on their parents to guide them and direct them. But they get to a certain age where they're like, hey, my parents not only taught me this, but they've empowered me, inspired me to take ownership and take leadership, to take control, responsibility, and accountability for my actions. And that's where parents have an opportunity to do that. So it is absolutely important because I think it determines the altitude that young people will take later in life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're looking for to us for the guidance, right? Like we are the first model that they have, which I
Oh,
think also,
100%.
yeah, which also puts parents, I mean, it's pressure, but like a good kind of pressure of like it's help. I think my kids help me to be the best version of myself.
Oh, 100%. And I'd say the same thing about the kids that I coach. And some, to give a perfect example, there's been kids that when I wrote my book, I reached out to kids that I coached over the years. I was like, hey, I'm writing this book. I'd love for you to contribute a little bit of a snippet of what you learned, or whatever. The very first testimonial I received was from a kid that I coached on my very first team in 1985 when he was 10 years old. And I'm saying to myself, taught you something way back then that you
Hmm.
can still recall. And it was like an entire story, and you don't realize it. It kind of leads to your question about, is leadership important? We're making an impact on kids when we don't even realize we're making an
Hmm.
impact on kids. And that testimonial, that and that story, and there was some funny things in there. I was like, oh my gosh, this kid remembered.
Hmm.
But he said it was the lessons that were taught, and the that leadership can be tough, but it can also be fun because everything in life doesn't have to be serious.
Yeah, I love that because I do think that sometimes when we think about leadership, we think about just like responsibility and ownership, and those are part of that skill. But it's not just that. I think we also lead our kids to having fun, like doing those kind of things and to enjoy life because I think excuse me, if we're not enjoying life, then what are we really doing here, right? Like I think this world is to be enjoyed.
Oh, 100% it is. And I think the world we live in today, there's so many pressures that parents already have enough at home, with, responsibilities of running a home. And this is why the leadership is important, because they can share that with their kids. So they can share some of that responsibility, takes off some of that pressure. Now
Hmm.
that family's getting stronger, their communication's better, their relationships are better. Now kids understand the importance of relationship, because leadership also entails a lot about relationship building.
Hmm.
And this is something that, I think, besides leadership, relationships are so important, because
Hmm.
there's so many different relationships you have, and people come into your life for a reason, and some come into your life for a season. And it's for
Hmm.
you to understand what that is. In order to do that, you really have to decipher and understand the importance of what that relationship is, and more importantly, what it can be.
Hmm. Yeah, and as you were saying that, I was just thinking like there are bosses in life and there's leaders, and sometimes your boss is also a good leader, but like that may just be the person that's in charge of you, right? Whether it's a parent or a teacher or an actual boss at a place of employment, but then leaders, I think there's so many skills that they do, like when things don't go well, they're there to show up, right? And they're not they're like, hey, I'm here to take ownership of this, and then like taking that back to their team to say, let's learn from this, right?
Yes.
And being able to help people grow through that, like what didn't go well here, what did go well here, how do we grow? And I think that's also a parent responsibility to do that. I As we're talking about this, it's making me think of this story. We play Skippo at our house, which is like a card game, and we like it. And you have like a deck that you turn over a card to see what's next. And I didn't notice this about myself at the time, but I guess I was saying like, ah, of course, right? Because like I'd play a one and then I'd get another one and I didn't have anywhere to put it, right? So then I noticed my daughter who is playing with me, who's 7, also doing that. And I was like, ooh, I don't like that. Right. Like, and then I was like, I'm going to change that because she was kind of my mirror to show me how I was leading her in that moment. And I didn't like that. So the cool part is, I said to her, I realize you're doing this thing that I was doing because I know I was doing that. But I don't like when I hear you say that, I don't like how it sounds because it's kind of negative. And so I'm going to stop doing that. If you catch me doing that, will you let me know? And she was like, yeah, mom, I'll do that. And then she stopped doing it too. And I was like, amazing. Like that was so easy to do.
Yeah, now you're talking about the empowerment part and the inspiration part. You're sharing. That's a perfect example of how you can pass that on. But more importantly, you're willing to do that, to be genuine and authentic with your daughter and go, hey, I know she's looking to me, but I have to show her that I'm not perfect. And
Mhm.
I think that that's somewhere where parents need to understand that, yes, you are a parent, but you know what? Your kids also have to understand that you're not perfect.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the hardest things for some parents to understand because they feel like they have to be right, they have to be perfect all the time. And you touch on another part that's really important. That's the collaboration aspect of leadership. That's collaborating on, you're talking about bosses and hey, what didn't work well, what did work well. When you have a leader that's genuine and willing to listen to others and go, hey, okay, well, oh my gosh, they're actually listening to me. Well, let me kind of interject this. And I got a perfect, if I don't know if there might be a time to do it, but as you're sharing that, one of my top, this has to be my top two um, coaching success stories. And
Mhm.
it has nothing, it has to do with me, but to me, it has nothing to do with me and everything to do with these young men that I was coaching. This happened 2 years ago. Um, Coaching a middle school boys basketball team. And I've always been about empowerment and giving cats an opportunity. Well, we had an incident in practice and it was kind of comical. And we had an app where we shared everything. And I kind of brought it home and I edited, put a little sound effect and everything, and I sent it to the team. And I specifically said, this is for us. Do not share this with anyone else. This is for the team to kind of enjoy. Well, the next day I go to practice, and before practice starts, two of the eighth graders come to me and they say, "Coach T, one of the guys showed the video to some of his classmates, some of the girls in his class." And my first response was, "What are we going to do about it?"
Mhm.
And without hesitation, Bryce, they said, "Make him sit in the bleachers and watch us run for his mistake." And inside, I'm going like, that makes no sense, but no, it does make sense.
Mhm.
And I told him, I said, okay. I said, I like that so much. I'm going to let you use that as your punishment. But if there's anything else that you as a team want to, you guys will have to discuss it afterwards. So I asked a young man, pulled him aside, I go, hey, did you show the video to anybody else? And he goes, yes, sir, I did. I said, okay, well, here's what's going to happen. You'll sit in the bleachers and watch your teammates run. And I've never been a big fan of running for punishment. I don't believe it
Mhm.
truly serves a purpose. But for this incident, I wanted to honor what the guys had decided to do. So they did the running. And as they're doing, I kind of glance over and the young man starts crying because he's feeling really guilty and upset.
Mhm.
So after practice, I gave them about 5 minutes and they all got together and they kind of talked about it with the young man there, not without him. And they came to me after and they said, Coach, we all voted on it. We talked about it. We discussed it, voted, and it was unanimous. For our next game, he will not get to play, nor will he get to dress with the team, but he can sit on the bench. And I'm saying to myself, wow. I mean, I hope I never make a mistake with these guys. So I asked the young man, I said, do you understand what's happening here? He goes, yes, sir. I made a mistake and I have to accept the responsibility for it. I say, okay. Well, I said, what else? He goes, I'm gonna have to go home and tell my parents why I'm not going to be playing and why I'm not going to be dressing for the game. Long story short, we go undefeated, win the conference championship. That situation was never brought up. But to me, it was the epitome of leadership, communication, accountability, responsibility, you name it. These kids just wrapped it up in a bow. I mean, it was just, I get goosebumps telling that story, but it's just
Mhm.
one of the proudest moments I have. But that's what leadership can do for young people when you give them the opportunity to do it.
Yeah, I really think kids want to do well. Like I think they want to succeed and sometimes they just don't know how to do it. They haven't had that model or somebody who's an example. As a therapist, I find myself sometimes there other therapists will say like, "Oh, I just middle school is like not an age that I like." And I have always had a different feeling about that because I love working with all the ages for a different reason, but middle schoolers are so special to me because I think they are so positively influenceable. They are just they're dying for somebody to model something fantastic for them to replicate.
Oh, 100%. And I'm 100% in agreement with you. When I first started coaching, I wanted to be a Division I college coach. Then I'm like, no, I want to be a high school coach. And now I want to and then when I started my nonprofit, you're 100% right. The most influential kids were the middle school kids, and were the ones that gravitated to the knowledge and to the
Mhm.
opportunities that were afforded them and presented to them. So I agree with you 100% that that is the most influential group and the group that really loves the attention, but also welcomes the challenges that are presented to them.
Yeah. So I love that story. And it's helping me to think about what I want to know next, which is how do we raise strong leaders? Like, how do you coach kids into being that type of leader? I know we've given some examples, but what do you think the bigger theme is? Or do you think that kids that are great leaders are just born that way?
I do believe it's a little bit of both. Some people are born with leadership skills. There's no question about it. And then you keep in mind, many kids are intimidated by kids that are born with that, and they feel as though,
Hmm.
well, oh my gosh, he's got great leadership skills. I wish I could be like that, but I can't be like that.
Hmm.
I personally believe everyone can be a leader if they're willing. There's two things to think about here. What are you capable of, and what are you willing to do?
Hmm.
Everybody's capable of doing anything, but are you willing to put forth the effort to be what you want to be? So
Hmm.
I strongly believe that everyone has the capability of being a leader, and it's all different types of leaders. You have your vocal leaders and people inspired by emotion, but you have quiet leaders. And the story I gave you was from quiet leaders. They led by example. So you can lead by example, you can lead verbally, you can lead with emotion, but people feed off of different types of leadership, which means everybody has the ability to be a leader, just whatever type leader you want to be.
Yeah. So it's like looking for the right candidate to lead, right? And also exhibiting those right qualities of maybe what's being looked for in that group, right? I think even in my friend group, I can think about that of like some people are like the first to offer something or suggest something, and other people, it's like when they're quiet, you're like, hey, what are you thinking? Tell
Yeah,
me. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And I think some are intimidated because they feel like, oh, I can't say that. There's no such thing as not the right answer. Everybody thinks differently. Everybody processes different. And if kids understand when you're teaching leadership, it's like your personality determines what type of leader you are.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, like me, I have a very outgoing personality, so I'm always very animated, very energetic. That's just my personality. So that's how I
Mm-hmm.
lead. People feed off of that. But the flip side, I've had people that haven't been receptive to that type because their personality doesn't really feel comfortable with that, which
Mm-hmm.
means I changed my leadership style to get through to certain kids when I'm working with them. It's like, okay, you need this type of approach. And that's what's important about teaching leadership is teaching not just, hey, be a leader, tell people what to do, and you're in charge. Well, that's going to really send kids on the wrong path.
Hmm. I love that. I mean, I think that actually is the sign of a great leader is the ability to adjust and adapt.
Oh, 100%. And I tell kids all the time, I'm always trying to be a better coach. And what better way to do that is by every child that you interact with, they provide you an opportunity to be a better coach, to learn
Hmm.
differently, to communicate differently, to get through to them. And some are quick and some take time. I have a young
Hmm.
man that just texted me the other day, and he and I butted heads like there's nobody's business for about 3 months, and he was in high school, thought he knew everything, and like great talent, but it's about team. Basketball's a team sport, and in this
Hmm.
environment, we play as a team. And even the other kids were like, "Hey, we don't do that. We play as a team." And I didn't see the kid for like 2 months. And
Hmm.
after 2 months, he started coming back to the open gyms and workouts. I never say anything to him about the last incident, but our relationship totally changed. And what I realized was when he left there, he's like, not only was that a great environment for me to be in, but Coach T told me something I needed to hear,
Hmm.
not what I wanted to hear.
Hmm.
And he told me that years later. He goes, you didn't let me be who I thought I was.
Hmm.
And he goes, you wanted me to be the best that I could be, and you were trying to point out areas that I could be in, that I could improve. And I said, yeah, but what you need to understand from me as a coach, I felt out of my comfort zone as a leader because I was being very straightforward and more forceful than I normally am, because I
Hmm.
always felt like I can get through to kids. To your point about changing, being willing to change your leadership style, I realized he needed tough love, and I'm not really good at tough love, but I realize sometimes if you have to, you have to.
Yeah. Well, and I think that speaks to how important it is for parents to adapt to what that particular child that they have needs. Because I think, we think about parenting our kids the same way and being the same parent to each kid and giving everybody what we deem to be fair. But that's not really maybe what is fair because each kid probably needs a different style of parenting because they're all different. And so I think that's something that can be so challenging about parenting. But I think our kids are watching us to see, and even maybe saying, like, each of you, if you have multiple kids, like everybody needs something different.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I'll add to that is we talk about kids, how they're learning. They listen with their eyes now. They don't listen with their ears. And I think for parents um, is do as I say, not as I do. As much as they don't want that to be the case, that's what the case is. And it's hard to lead your children when you're not leading by example.
Hmm.
And some kids at a certain point, remember, they're being influenced outside the home more so than they are inside the home. You know as well as I do, there's so many things out there distracting them. They're like, phones are totally, that's a whole different conversation. That's another world. But they're constantly around friends, they're around their peers and their influence. They want to keep up with the Joneses, as they say.
Hmm.
So parents have to understand that, but they also have to be in tune and connected with their kids and have those conversations so that they are carrying the home leadership approach outside the home too, because kids have to know, hey, hey, that sounds great, but it's not what we do. And I'm cool
Hmm.
with not being in the in crowd because I got to be true to who I am. And I'm also representing my family, not just
Hmm.
myself. And I think that's the other thing. That's one thing my dad always shared with us is everything you do is a reflection on this family, not just me as your father, not just your mom, but it's also your brothers. So you want to make sure you're setting a good example for your family. And then that is another thing that the parents can teach their kids at home is, hey, we as a family, this is who we are. This is what we believe. This is our way of leading, how we lead
Hmm.
our lives.
Yeah. How do you think you teach kids to do the part where you're saying, being true to themselves? And I mean, because I think that's something that kids really struggle with is to kind of buck the system, to go against what other people are doing. I think sometimes they can feel really embarrassed or, peer pressure will kind of push them into something that maybe or they allow that to happen because they're feeling afraid to push against this. How do you think we teach kids to do that?
To me, the biggest thing is to have conversations, consistent conversations. And when I say having conversations, it's asking thought-provoking questions. By asking thought-provoking questions, you initiate a conversation, not just a yes or no response
Hmm.
or because I said so kind of thing. But you ask a question and you get an answer, but you say because will encourage them to kind of add a little bit more, elaborate a little bit more on the answer. Now you're having a conversation, but that also leads to when you're having these conversations, it's a perfect opportunity for parents to be totally honest and true and authentic with their kids in those situations because giving examples of how they didn't succeed or how they failed in the same situation, even if you
Hmm.
got to make it up sometimes, but just so that they can connect to, because you have to connect the dots so your kids understand. I'd rather my son or daughter leave the house going, no, I can't do that. My dad did that and he came out okay.
Hmm.
It was a
Hmm.
tough situation, but he overcame it. There are going to be a lot of ebbs and flows in life, and kids need to understand that. And when you hit those low points, it's about what you do to get out of that low point. And there has to be some reinforcement, positive reinforcements from
Hmm.
parents and family to make the kids understand. It's not the end of the world. It's just a tough spot that you're going in, but you're going to be a better person and ultimately a better leader because of the experience that you're going through. But communication is a big part of how we get kids to understand the importance of being a good leader and getting out of life what they want.
Yeah. And I think I've heard people say over the years, like, you have one mouth and two ears, so listen more than you talk, right? I think it's asking those questions and then sitting back and just hearing what they come up with, even if there's a really long, uncomfortable pause, right? I think that could be the hardest part is like, okay, are you still with me? Right. But it's just like waiting. And I know that with even my own kids, where it's like, I'm like, hey, that issue that's happening on the playground, like, how are you going to handle that?
Yeah, I actually about a month ago, I was working. There's a young man we're coming from a workout, and he's a sophomore in high school. And he asked me specifically, "Hey, Coach T, how do you handle a situation when you're with a group of friends and you don't like what they're doing, but they're your friends?" And
Hmm.
I'm like, "Okay." I see you actually answered that question by asking me that question. So I'm going to revert back to you. And you tell me how do you feel? And he basically told me, goes, well, I don't like it. And I try to separate myself from them when they're doing those kind of things. I said, that's the perfect answer. but you just want me. I never give kids the answer. I always have conversations. I give my input, but I want them to answer their own question. But it goes back to what I was saying about communication and conversations.
Mhm.
They ask a question, make them think about it. One of the great thought provoking questions I like to ask kids, and I said it's just a perfect example, kind of questions you can ask your parents because you want to start dialogue with them, not always them asking questions, start conversations. You take the leadership role. You ask a question. You say,
Mhm.
"Hey, mom, dad, if there was a fire and you only could save three things, what would they be?"
Mhm.
Okay, so they pick that. Well, guess what? The kids are gonna start going like, "You wouldn't take this or you wouldn't take that." Well, guess what? It starts a conversation. It's a
Mhm.
fun conversation, but it leads to a lesson to be taught. I
Mhm.
did this with a group of kids, and they were all talking about, "Oh, my phone, my laptop, my this, that." And I said, "Oh, so you're gonna let your family die, but you're gonna get your phone." And they're like,
Mhm.
"Oh, okay, I got it." So as the other kids started thinking, they all took their time. That pause you're
Mhm.
talking about, there was a longer pause because they were thinking. It's like,
Mhm.
"Oh, my dog," and then this and the
Mhm.
other thing. I say, "Yeah, material things are just that, material
Mhm.
things." So just want to
Yeah,
throw
no,
that.
I love that because I think, asking those questions, I love the conversation cards, right? Where it's like everybody's asking one or coming up with a random open-ended question where, the kid comes up with it or everybody at the table is doing that so that we're getting to know each other for real, right? Not just that you're my parent, I'm the kid, here's how we do things. It's really about connecting, about understanding them, knowing them. And I think that builds great relationships with
Yeah, it
parent and child.
does, and I think you led it to a great another point too is how parents can utilize the resources like people like yourself and myself outside the home that align with their mission and vision for their kids, and understanding, hey, when you go with Bryce or you go with Coach T, I know you're in good hands because I know you can
Mhm.
be led in the right direction. Where some kids are not, and I've seen kids I've worked with, and they go work with other people, and their vision, their views are different. They come back and say, "Coach, yeah, this coach is different." I say, "Every coach coaches differently. There's nothing wrong with that." They're like, "Yeah,
Mhm.
but I like the way you coach and way you teach." I said, "Great. Take the way I coach and way I teach and incorporate that in the way you play and the way you go through other aspects of your life. And if you end up coaching, now you'll know, hey, I'm going to use what Coach T did, but I didn't like what this coach did. I'm not going to do that because it didn't
Mhm.
get the best out of me." So that's
Mhm.
what the other part about leadership too is take what you like, leave what you don't like.
Yeah. Well, and I think you also hit on a good point of like, as leaders, part of our main responsibility, I think, is to help the other people around us grow, right? So being a good leader means developing other leaders, but just like having people live into their full potential, like help guide them to that place where they feel comfortable and confident to just be them.
Yeah. Oh, there's no question about it. And uh, to the point about we're talking about, you were asking, is every child have the ability to be a leader? There are those that probably think they're not, but when they see just inkling of just a little bit, they start either questioning themselves or they start building on that,
Hmm.
and then it helps confidence. That leads to the heightened self-esteem and confidence levels, and I think that's another part that leads to good leaders too, is having a positive attitude. To me, your attitude almost always determines your altitude in life. I don't care what it
Hmm.
is you're going through. Even we're talking about developing leadership skills. It's about your attitude as you do that. I've
Hmm.
been around many people, as I'm sure you have, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, you're just in a position of leadership because you just want to control people,"
Hmm.
and it drags you down. But you
Yeah.
don't have to allow that to happen. So attitude to me is the most important. And you hit the key words: educate, support, inspire, and empower kids to
Yeah.
be leaders.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking about a situation that happened to me a couple years ago. I had a young girl who was in elementary school who was wearing some particular outfit. And then all the other girls started wearing the same outfit. And the girl came to me and she's like, I'm so upset about this situation because everybody's wearing what I'm wearing. And I was like, can I offer a different perspective on this? And she was like, yeah, I guess. And I was like, how cool is it that everybody is looking up to you to be such a great model? They really are inspired by you. Like, what a great opportunity. And then she was like, yeah, I'll think on that. Right. And then she came back the next week and she was like, you know what? I'd say this is actually pretty cool. Like, this is kind of a position where I mean, this is cool, right? And I was like, yeah, this is so cool. Like, what a great opportunity. And she really lived into that. And I heard years later, we had, finished our time together. And I heard years later by somebody else who knew her, but they didn't know that I knew her, about how great of a leader she was. And I was like, maybe, just maybe that one thing really inspired her to live into that.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I knew where you were going with that as soon as you said it, because I was kind of I get I'm one of those people get like goosey, all goosebumpy when I hear stories like that, because I really understood where you were going with that story. Um, but there's one is similar. I mentioned to you about the kid my first year of coaching. Well, about 3 years ago, I got an email from a former player who's currently a high school coach in Virginia, and he said, "Hey, Coach T, I got a message from a guy that said he played for you at Meadowbrook High School, and he's trying to get in touch with you." I'm like, and he want to know if he could get my info. I'm like, "Yeah, give him my info." So he gives him the info, and I get the email. As soon as I saw the name, I knew who it was, and I'm not saying I'm perfect. I have been coached for almost 30, 40 years. I know every player I've ever coached. If I saw a name, I know who they were. I could tell you a story about them. Well, I saw the name, like, oh my gosh, you got to be kidding me. Well, this young man wanted to get in touch with me. As soon as I saw him, we set up a Zoom call. I went downstairs, went through my box. I pulled my box out with a team picture. I scanned it. I scanned it, circled his name, and I had it as my backdrop. So he knew I knew who he was. So it wasn't like I was just saying it. So I put it up. We had our Zoom call, and he wanted to get in touch with me because his 15-year-old son is going through a tough time with one of his coaches. And he said he caught himself reciting things that I said to him. This was in 1991. And he was a freshman at the time. I was coaching the freshman team and our junior varsity team. But he said he was reciting things I had told him back then. He goes, I got to get help touch with Coach T and tell him, what an inspiration he's been, and that I'm sharing things that he taught us. And I mean, I had to fight back tears because it's a pride moment. But again,
Mhm.
going back to, you don't realize how much of an impact you're having on kids. But it also, the point I'm making is, be careful what you say to kids, because it could have
Mhm.
a positive impact or it could have a negative impact on
Mhm.
them. And it doesn't take much for that kid that's on the fence about what if they have confidence in being a leader or what type of leader they're going to be.
Yeah, so true. I read something once that has impacted me as a parent, that our voice to our kids in the moments that we're upset with them becomes their internal voice. And so I'm so careful about what I say in those moments. Not that my kids don't get feedback, not that my kids don't get consequences for things, not that there's not redirection, but I'm careful about how I say it, right? And sometimes I let them lead me to the consequence. Like, hey, this is the thing that happened. That's not in alignment with how we do things in this family. So what do you think your consequence should be? And then my kids will come up with something, right? And they'll be like, sometimes they come up with like the most awful consequences, like you were saying earlier. I'm like, I don't know that that's necessary, right? I'll be like, well, okay, well, I'll take that into consideration. But what if we did this? And then they think they're relieved. I'm like, let's do half that consequence. And they're like, oh, okay, I only have to pick up poop in the yard from the dog for like 2 days instead of 10. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, that seems, yeah, I mean, okay, I can get behind that, right? Like, you say something that's poopy, you get to pick up poop in the yard. I'm like, yeah, I can draw that line, right?
Yeah.
Of what it is. But I think it's yeah, we have such an opportunity in this. So what do you think is either misunderstood or underappreciated about leadership?
I can tell you, when it comes to kids, it's about their ability to be and to show. And I think that many educators, parents, coaches, employers, they don't trust kids enough to make decisions that are in their best interest. And in reality, they have the ability, they have the willingness, and they have the heart to want to, but they're hesitant because all they hear is how to do, what to do, why to do.
Hmm.
And that to me is really, and this is coming, not just my opinion. And this is coming straight from the horse's mouth. These are middle school, high school, even elementary school kids and college kids saying, yeah, it would be great if they would just allow us to do what we're capable of doing.
Mhm.
And to me, I want to be an advocate for them in that regard. Now, granted, there are going to be times where, they do, and it's like it didn't turn out good. It's like, see that Coach T, he told you to do it. That was a terrible idea. But guess what? That's part of the process. I would
Mhm.
still stand behind it because every kid's not going to succeed at everything they do the first time. But it's
Mhm.
what we do when they don't
Yeah.
succeed that first time. Are you going to pick them up? I don't know if your kids play sports, but I always tell kids and tell parents, when your kid plays a game, a sport, no matter what it is, there are four things in play every time they play a sport. They're trying to please their parents, they're trying to please their coach, they're trying to please their teammates. But the most important person they're trying to please is themselves. And they cannot do that if the other three are disrupting the thought processes. After a sport, what do you think? There's a lot of parents that get in the car, they're going back, the team didn't do well. The parents are chewing the kid out for
Mhm.
missing, striking out four times or missing the game winning free throw or whatever it may be. That's not what they need to hear.
Mhm.
They're already beating themselves up. What they need
Mhm.
to hear is, I'm proud of you. You played really hard. It's too bad you guys didn't win, and you'll get them the next time. Guess what? They're
Mhm.
just going to get over that loss a lot faster because they're already
Mhm.
beating themselves up. The coaches already chewed them out. The teammates have probably got it. So you got to understand where kids are mentally, and
Mhm.
that affects their growth and their ability to become the leaders that they want to be.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think supporting our kids, in my mind, is one, acknowledging the feelings they may be having, and two, offering them confidence. Like, man, that was hard loss today, right? But you just worked so hard. I know you're going to get back out there and work, right? Your team is really prepared to do this, or you guys are really going to take what didn't go so well today and apply that to your practice next time. Like, I believe in you guys.
Yeah. Oh, no question about it. And I hate to keep telling these stories, but these just kind of tie in a perfect example of what we're talking about. I said a couple years ago, this thing happened, go back 3 years. There's a kid that's been in my nonprofit since he was in the fourth grade, lack confidence. Every
Mhm.
time you turn around, Coach G, did I do that right? Was that good? Or every time you do something, you look at me for affirmation, it's confirmation that was a good job. And I'm like, hey, just do your thing. You know what you're doing is right, or if it's not right, you got to trust yourself. Just go through it. So
Mhm.
fast forward, he ends up eventually playing for me on the school team. He didn't make the varsity team as a seventh grader, but he made it as an eighth grader, as like a sub, like the eighth or ninth, uh, third or fourth player off the bench. Just during COVID season, so it's 4 years ago, and we lost two starters, one to injury, one to quarantine. So he gets catapulted into the starting lineup. This kid waits till the tournament time to just totally just take over. Ends up making the all tournament team, ends up scoring 9 points and basically hitting the game winning shot and win the championship by 3 points. He hits a three. And after the game, came to me and said, Coach, I really want to thank you for believing in me. I said, hey, I've always believed in you. You just didn't believe in yourself. And when you finally did,
Mhm.
this is the results you've gotten. And he's just since then he's just flourished. He's in high school as a junior now. I think it's a junior now, playing football, playing baseball, and just really flourishing. But it's an example of you may not start there, but you can end there if you put forth the right effort and you have the right support behind you.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Something I sometimes say to kids is like when they're in a hard spot, I'm like, I know you may not believe that you're going to get out of this, but can I hold on to the hope for you until you're
Ooh,
ready to hold it for yourself? And they'll
oh, I
be
like
like,
that.
yeah. And I'm like, okay, you let me know when you're ready, right? To hold on to it for yourself. But I'm going to hold on to it because I know that you're going to do great things. I think that's another part is like, one, believing in our kids, but also like telling them how great they are. It's not an effort to like build unnecessary confidence or to have them be pompous, but just to say like, I think you're a great leader. This is something I saw in you that I thought was really admirable. Or this is something that really inspires me to be a better person. Like I love it when I see this, like I that reminds me how I could do that. Or when you handled this situation, I saw that that was frustrating, but you got your head back in the game or you reapplied yourself or whatever it was, or like you didn't let that keep you down. You got back in there. Like that's motivating to me. And I think when kids see that they're making an impact on us as adults, that's huge.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great segue. And to challenging kids and even asking, I asked kids, I said, hey, what do you think you've taught me?
Mm,
And I'm actually starting I want to say about this a perfect way. I'm starting my second book, and it's legacy letters. And half the book, the kids are basically writing the book. And one of the questions I asked them is, what did they teach me? And I've gotten, some things back, and I'm like, I love this because they're actually taking the time, to go, yeah, but I'm also letting them know, I know you taught me something because
hmm
I wouldn't ask you the question if I didn't get something from you. And I think that's an empowerment thing too, because
hmm
they're going like, oh my, you're the coach and you're asking me what I taught you.
hmm
Oh, well, let me see here. What did I teach you? One of the kids told me, that told me how I could act young even though I'm old. So I'm like, okay, all
Yeah, they're
right, well,
keeping you honest. Yeah.
yeah. See, I like the honesty, but that's the great thing about it. But it also
hmm
goes to the relationship, going back to
Yeah.
the importance of relationships, the
hmm
honesty, the authenticity, the genuality. Once they recognize that, they're going to open up more. So, and it goes to your
hmm
point about how we make kids be where they want to be is by being genuine, being open to them, and not making everything so serious. They have
hmm
so much ahead of them. When they get to where we are, where they're taking care of bills and they're doing all these other things, they're young. Let them be fun, but we can teach them lessons along the way so that they're prepared to take on that leadership and that responsibility and that accountability when the time comes.
hmm Well, and I think play is a great way for kids to learn how to do really everything, right? Like we can use a game, whether it's sports or a board game or an activity, to teach them so many things. And I feel like they learn a lot more from those things than they do the words that we're saying to them sometimes.
Yeah, and their lives are so. I would tell you what, I would not want to be a teenager in this day and age. I mean, I think about when I grew up, like, well, we had a lot less responsibilities because no phones, all the electronics, and
hmm
school has become so automated. Because there's um, programs, parents logging into the school to see the kids' homework, where we used to bring it home. Half the parents have to sign it, physically sign it, and then you're like, oh, it's not a good paper, but you have to get it signed, but that adds more pressure,
hmm
because you're like, okay, got to do my thing, but I'm not there. But there's mounting pressure, not just home, but there's peer pressure. And I think that's the other thing parents need to understand too. Kids are not just trying to live up to your expectations. They're trying to live up to the expectations of their friends and their peers, their teammates, and all the other people outside the home. And even when they come home, they don't just leave it. Just like when you come home, you or go to work, you don't just leave everything at home when you go to work. You don't leave everything at work when you come home. And so you can't expect kids to do that. There's too much going
hmm
on up here. And
hmm
they're not, brains aren't fully developed till they're in the mid 20s. So there's so much going on there. They're emotional roller coasters. And we have to understand that, but also be anticipating that. And when those times come, when they're hitting those lows, be prepared to lift them up instead of continuing to beat them down.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's also a sign of a good leader too, is like we're there to support when things are low and we're there to celebrate when things are great.
There's no question about that. I'm going to give a shout out. I'll keep talking about this team, the schoolwork coach. One of the players on this team is now he's a fifth year senior. He's the place kicker for the University of Notre Dame. And he has actually submitted his story for my book. But when he sent it to me, he goes, even though I'm playing Division I college football, but he said those 4 years playing there with you and the team, goes, the highlight of my athletic career. And I'm
Ah,
thinking, are you kidding me? You're going to be playing in the NFL next year, more than likely. He goes,
hmm
yeah, but it's not about that. It's about the experience. So I say all that to go back to the importance of leadership and the experience that kids can have with the right support, the right guidance, and the right leadership.
Love it. Okay, so what do you want kids to take away from this conversation? If you could talk to them specifically about leadership, what would you want to say?
They have the ability to be whatever and whoever they want, and they need to embrace. And then they're empowered to, but to be motivated to be responsible for their own success and don't allow other people to dictate your level of success. And it
hmm
starts early, and it starts every day that you wake up, you have the ability to be a better person, better leader, better friend, better teammate, better son, better daughter, better niece, nephew, whatever it may be. Every aspect of your life is influenced by how you approach every day, And a positive attitude is how you do it. Simplify your life by making everything as positive as you possibly can, even when it doesn't go your way, because a positive attitude helps you overcome those challenges. And that's the effort part, is putting forth the effort to straighten your attitude, because a positive attitude always leads to success.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think a negative attitude can bring you down every single time, right? But if you're positive, it's not about like being toxically positive, right? Like you can say like, this sucks, but right, to instill that positive part, to leave space for something great to happen. I love that. So how about
Yeah.
parents? What do you want them to take away from this conversation?
Be willing to let your kids fail and don't
Mhm.
protect them all the time, because the more you do that, you're setting them up for failure. Because a player that, well, let's just use sports in general. These kids are transferring from here to there. I don't like this, so I'm going here. Well, when you get in the real world, your boss doesn't let you quit a job and go to a different department because you don't like it. Well, if you allow your kids to do that now, then you're setting them up for failure. And it's also a reflection back on you as a parent. So if your kid doesn't do well, don't go to the teacher, go, why did my son fail? Well, your son or your daughter failed because they didn't do the work. So
Mhm.
I'm not going to give him a passing grade because they didn't do the work. Well, he may have always done it then, but he's not doing it now.
Mhm.
And in my class, he's going to earn it. Well, you should be going home and going, hey, you know what? You're going to be repeating the class, that grade again because you didn't do your work. No, mom, nope, you got to earn it. And that's what parents have to do. Allow your kids to fail. That's why we're losing a lot of good teachers and a lot of good coaches, because parents aren't willing to let their kids fail. They're trying to go defend their kids at every turn, not getting the true story.
Mhm. Well, and I think kids do mess up, right? We've got to anticipate that they are going to make mistakes, but that's where you learn the most, right? And I think when I think about kids quitting things, there is sometimes where I do tell parents, I think it's time to let this thing go, but that's rare. Um, because I think that there is something to be learned, and that when we have fear, anxiety, discomfort, that's because we're growing, right? That's the hard part. And so sometimes you do have to sit in the uncomfortable to get to where you're going.
And you also, I think the other part there is important too, is parents ask you, challenge yourself. So when you go and defend your child, what would your parents have done if you did that? I can assure you it wouldn't be what you're doing now. I would bet $1 million, not $1 million, okay, 100, half a million, but I would bet. But I would use myself as an example. One of the things you're
Mhm.
asking about myself, I got cut from the high school basketball team every year. But you know what? It's the best thing that ever happened, because I wouldn't be the coach I am today if I hadn't gotten cut from the basketball team, because I still love the sport, and it was not going to allow me to do what I love doing. I love the sport. If I couldn't play it, I'll figure out another way. And I like to think I put even more effort into coaching because it became more fun to me,
Mhm.
because what I wasn't able to do on the court, I'm able to teach kids how to do on the court, and then
Mhm.
also teach them how to do off the court.
Yeah, I love that you're using your gift for probably exactly what you were meant to do.
I like to think so.
That's
Yeah, I like to
amazing.
think so.
Thank you so much, Coach T. This has been such an awesome conversation. I appreciate all of your thoughts today.
Oh, well, thank you, Bryce. I really appreciate you having me on, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about something that's really important, and that's the next generation of leaders, the people that are going to take care of me when I'm in the nursing home.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Coach T. That was amazing information. I love this idea that everybody can be leaders. They just need good leaders to mimic and to believe in them and to guide them. And with that, I will say thank you so much for your time today. Please rate and subscribe to our show. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And also keep the emails coming with topic suggestions for future shows to accidentalexperts@gmail.com. Have a fantastic day. Some words from our legal team.
The information presented in this podcast is not intended or implied to be a substitute for appropriate professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. All content, including text, graphics, images, and information contained on or available through this podcast, is for general information purposes only. This podcast makes no representations and assumes no responsibility for the accuracy or information on or available through this podcast, and such information is subject to change without notice. You are encouraged to confirm any information obtained through this program with other sources and review all information regarding any condition or treatment with the appropriate professionals.
What we're saying is, yes, I am a real therapist, but I'm not your therapist.